Now, it was reported this week that the children of British ISIS fighters face the prospect of being left in Syria and other war zones as the government will not bring them back to the UK. The Times said the decision was made by Sajid Javid while he was still Home Secretary, as he thought it was too risky to send people or troops to rescue them. But should we be doing more to help innocent British children and babies, or would it actually be wrong to separate them from their parents? Well, here to talk through these issues are lawyer Nimra Tahir and writer for Spiked Online, Fraser Myers. Fraser, there's been a lot of discussion about the fate of those people from Britain who went to live in ISIS territory. About 900 of them, we think. Lots of talk about them, but not about the children. We don't know the numbers of the children. What do you think should be happening?
Well, I think the ideal in the long term is that the children are brought home. As you've alluded to, they are innocent. It's not them who decided to go out and fight for ISIS. But at the same time, that does raise all kinds of interesting questions, interesting problems in terms of if you bring them home, will their parents, who could well be, you know, ISIS killers and terrorists, will they have a claim to British citizenship, even though we've been trying to keep them out in Syria? What are the logistical problems of this? So, for instance, France and Belgium have repatriated 13 children. It took them months of vetting, months of negotiations. They had to be airlifted out. It's extremely complicated. And that's just, you know, about 13 children out of the 1,300 of European children that are still out there.
It's incredibly complicated, isn't it?
I personally think it is. It's really complicated, and I think each case should be looked at on its merits. So we don't know who these children belong to. So, for example, are these so-called jihadi brides? Have they flown there to actually fight, or are these people who actually got caught in conflict? We need to find out the level of involvement within these military or war zone sort of situations. We need to know that in order to establish how much risk these people actually pose to the UK society, and then we can go and follow the full due process and follow the legal system through bringing them back and actually doing something about it. And I think we do have the mechanisms, we do have the system available in the UK to make that happen.
I mean, you say the risk to society. These are children, aren't they?
Yes, but you have to acknowledge that they have been through a lot. They may have seen so much, which might be quite difficult for them to come here, or their minds may have been radicalised. They might be filled with totally different ideologies, which us as British people does not support our British values.
Fraser, the parents haven't been found guilty of anything. Can we really take the children off them?
Well, I think that's one of the questions. I suppose we have a general idea of what the parents might have done, and even the brides. I mean, there's no these might just be the wives of fighters, but they're not innocent at all. The kind of things that they were, getting up to in Syria, stitching bombs into suicide jackets, owning slaves, things like that. I think it's hard to establish who is guilty and innocent in a war zone.
But the children weren't doing that, were they? I mean, well, are we punishing the children for the sins of the parents? We wouldn't do that, say, a murderer in the UK. We wouldn't punish the son or daughter of a murderer, would we?
Well, that's why we have to take these things on a case-by-case basis, because a lot of these children could be radicalised. That's not to say they can't be de-radicalised, but, I mean, even recently, it was a child who climbed up the top of a flagpole in a Syrian camp and planted the ISIS flag there. So, there's a lot of work to do to establish whether these children are a security risk, which sounds crazy, but I'm afraid it's true in this context.
That's a good point, Nimra, but I keep going back to the fact it's a child. I mean, they could be groomed.
No, I completely agree, and you shouldn't be blaming the child for their parents' wrongdoings. I completely agree. I think that the focus here is that we need to investigate, we need to distinguish between who is actually a risk to our society and who is not a risk to our society. We do have these processes in place, and then we can establish how we can go forward. And I think it might be a good idea to follow the de-radicalisation programmes, put them in there, potential detention centres. There's so many different options. Even in our schools, we've got, the preventing radicalisation policies in place in schools to make sure that we monitor what is going on, how children behave. And if we've got all these mechanisms available, my question is, why can't we bring them back? What is there that's actually stopping us to carry out all of this legal due process to make this happen?
Nimra, Fraser, we're out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you very much indeed.